All right. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is feeling great this Friday morning. Sun shining, Friday before a long weekend. So hopefully you've got some exciting plans over the long weekend. And welcome to this morning's Krembil coffee break session. This one, what I'm going to do is we're going to go over a bit of video editing, just some of the very basics. I know video editing is a very large umbrella, and so there's a lot of things that can fall under video editing and so many different aspects of video editing. But what I will do is sort of go through the very basics in an editor that is free on the desktop version. There are also mobile editors that I will touch on, but let's talk a little bit about video editing itself. So, all videos, mostly every video you'll ever see online on YouTube, has been edited in some way, shape, or form. So for us at Krembil, we have a YouTube page and we put a lot of content on there. And a lot of that content surrounds all of Krembil's pillars, which is brain, arthritis, and vision. So anything to do with that type of research, the scientists associated with that type of research, trainees, or any new discoveries. So really, we try and showcase all those cool findings, tell stories of the researchers and how they got to researching those things that they do, and that kind of stuff. So it's really a cool way to tell a story, right? Like you ask someone a few questions and then you get some really cool responses, and then you find a way to put that all together with some photos, some graphics, and that's basically what you'll see on our YouTube page. So we'll talk about a little bit about how media is constantly evolving, especially with the rise of social media apps like TikTok, Instagram Reels, and more video-focused social media platforms. It's shifting in such a way that all the algorithms that drive these social media platforms is pushing more and more video content. Even the CEO, I would say maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, of Instagram came out and said that they are no longer a photo sharing app. So a lot of these platforms are shifting to shifting away from a photo-centric or photo-based content sharing, and are gearing towards video sharing content. So everyone has got to find a way to create video and content and put together quick, short, digestible video pieces. And we have a real opportunity in science to do that, because it can be a bit challenging, I will admit, because we have to digest all that research and then also make it into plain language. If you missed yet last week's workshop, be sure to check that out on YouTube. It talks all about plain language. And then we have to find a way to communicate that in usually under a minute, because people's attention spans are very short, especially on social media. If you don't get someone within the first 10 to 15 seconds, you've probably lost them. And that can be very challenging, especially with science, which can come off as, somewhat dry or can be boring to certain audiences. So we've got to find a way to kind of spice that up, make it interesting whenever we're creating our video or the video edit it. So I'll briefly touch about capturing video. Now, of course, there's a lot more detail in that, but really what we want to focus on is that the story that you have in mind, and you can sort of plan out accompanying visuals. And the second point is very important, because with anything video related at UHN, you have to let public affairs know, and because there is consent involved. So anybody that's being captured in your video has to sign a UHN consent form, make sure that they're okay with it. You have to avoid getting patients or common areas of the hospital or research facilities. So there are a lot of guidelines surrounding video, especially on site at UHN. So it's always good to check with your public affairs representative whether this is okay or whether this is a good idea. And just make sure that we're all clear and there's no confusion, or and the messaging is also consistent with UHN policies, right? When it comes to the assets for video, they don't always have to be a talking head or some cool looking clip or anything like that. It can also be photos that you can include in your video, and graphics as well that you may have created or included in some other type of communication. You can use your cell phone to get video. A lot of cell phone cameras have really good video features built in already, so why not use what's already in your pocket? Also keep in mind, when you are developing your story, leave room to rework the story, because you don't know what, say, people's responses are going to be, or you don't know if you're going to have that asset or anything like that. So you may have to rework how you plan out your video. Um, in terms of composition, this is more so for if you're filming people and things, like say you're in a lab and you might want to get a cool video of your DNA sequencer. So you might want to, plan out what you're going to show. And really the idea is to focus on what you want your viewer to see. The last thing is lighting. Lighting is obviously, one of the most important things when it comes to capturing video. So you want to make sure that, things are well lit. Of course, when it comes to lab spaces and general office spaces at UHN, you've got your fluorescent lights, which are pretty even. So there's not much you really can do. Although sometimes there are some big windows in some of the lab areas. So you might want to position, someone or something in that sort of pool of light that might be coming in from a window to sort of get a nice, even, soft light. So these are the very, very basics of capturing video. And again, you definitely want to get in touch with your public affairs representative just to make sure that what you're doing or whatever you are capturing is in line with, Krembil or UHN policies. And the second half of video editing, before we jump into the editor, is editing video. So there are tons of programs that you can use to edit videos. The one that you'll sort of see for mobile apps is InShot. And InShot is kind of great because you can have different video layers. So you can kind of have one video layer and then say you want to add a photo that can live on a second layer. And I'll show you what that looks like when we jump into the editor itself. For Apple products, you have iMovie, and iMovie is available on iPhones, iPads, MacBooks, and I think it comes pre-installed on pretty much every Apple device, if I'm not mistaken. For Windows users, there is Video Editor. If you guys remember Windows Movie Maker, I remember cutting my very first video on Windows Movie Maker, and it was a promposal that my best friend did for his partner at the time when we were back in high school. It's a really simple interface, and so it was very intuitive to kind of get used to that. Also, there's Final Cut, which is also an Apple-based product, so you won't see that in Windows. Premiere Pro is the Adobe flavor of Final Cut, which is cross-platform. Now, Final Cut and Premiere Pro are paid services as well. So, if you are cutting a lot of video, maybe you have an Adobe subscription already, and that might be included. Or if you decide, you want to up your video editing game, and you might like the Apple ecosystem, so you go with Final Cut. The next one is DaVinci Resolve, which I personally really like and I've been a big fan of. And I actually taught myself how to use this editor over the pandemic. It's really interesting because there is a studio version of it, and there is also a free version of it. And the way that the company sort of positioned, which is Blackmagic Design, is that Blackmagic Design is a tech company. And so obviously, if you're in the film and media industry, they want you to purchase their products. So they offer the editor free, at least a light version of the editor, so that you're kind of enticed to go back and use the other products. And it worked for me, so I'll say that. But DaVinci Resolve is actually it's a standard in at least the commercial world for video editors. And the nice thing is it has got so many features, and the free version has pretty much 80% of the functionality of the studio version. So it does, have a lot of functionality, and there are a lot of tools in there. Again, I will go over the basic tools and show you some examples of how to use those tools. The last one, Avid Media Composer, that's pretty much every Hollywood film I can think of has probably been cut on Avid Media Composer, and it's the one people will learn when they go to film school. I believe it's the one that all the big studios in Toronto will use. I think even the television networks will also use Avid Media Composer to cut together their segments and pieces. Once you've decided on your editor, you kind of have to stay organized with your video footage, because what happens is the editor basically has an address to where those files stay. And if that address changes and you move that to somewhere else, those files, then what happens is that the editor doesn't know where to find those files. So once you have all your assets, you kind of want to put them into one folder. That's going to be basically the final folder of where all those assets will live, so that when you import those assets into the editor, your computer or your system knows where to find those assets for the video that you're going to be cutting together. And the last thing is basically you want to focus on the story with the edit. And this comes back to sort of the writing when you're pre-planning and what you want to shoot. There is a bit involved with video, and it's there are ways where you can run and gun it for sure, but you kind of want to really figure out what story you want to tell. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to every story. If in the simplest of terms, and in a video, you can consider that the hook and the problem, and then the steps to solve that problem, and then a solution and next steps. And that also applies to science, right? So when it comes to, say, a certain disease area or whatever you may be researching, you want to hook your audience in with maybe an interesting fact or a statistic, and then you want to describe the problem. And then in sort of the next 10 to 15 seconds, some of the steps to solve that could be your research, right? And then the solution would be what your research found, and then what the impact of that research is in the next step. So you can really capture a lot by just kind of answering these three questions, and then you can sort of pool them into the beginning, middle, and end. Of course, if you are creating videos for your department or a PI or your research, and maybe you're not the one that did the original research, or maybe your PI's asked you, could you put together something quick? Make sure you get sign-offs and approvals, because with communications, we want to make sure we're sending the right message, and that what we've created is actually true to the research or true to the message, and we're not missing any important details that may get misconstrued or anything like that. So that's the last part I would say in video editing, is getting sign-offs. And Heather and I always go back and forth, because sometimes there's a lot of changes to videos, and that's okay, because again, you've left room to rework the story where it needs to be reworked. But I would say that is a very important part of the video editing process. So what I will do now is I will actually share my screen for DaVinci Resolve, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's opened up. Essentially, it will lead you to this page. So I hope everyone can see this page. Let me know if you can't. I think it looks good. Yep, looks like it's being shared. So this is the first page of DaVinci Resolve when you open it up. And this is in the free version, the studio version. It looks exactly the same. And what you'll be brought to is the media page. And this is kind of where you import your media. And so this is what you'll basically find that folder where you've put everything in, and you're going to drop in all your assets for your video edit. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I can't share more than one window with Zoom, but what I have open in the background is basically where I've kept everything. And all I'm going to do is drag and drop all my folders and files into the master side here, so that all the folder structures are preserved. So what you'll see is basically in the master, you'll see I've got two examples. Hopefully I'll have enough time to kind of go through both really quickly, but I've got a little quick video that I'll show you that I'm going to create using some graphic elements and some photos. And then there's another video folder here with some assets for a Krembil minute that we created using photos and just some plain text. And I'll show you what that looks like as well. And then here is basically anything with a little music sign is a song. Keep in mind, you will have to find, if you want to include music, it has to be royalty-free music. And there are free royalty-free music platforms where you just have to credit the artist and the music thing. So it can be in a little sort of piece of text in, say, a caption, or in the description of a YouTube video, or wherever you're planning on putting your final edit. Of course, at Public Affairs, we have a licensing agreement with a royalty-free music company. So because we create a lot of videos, but for your department, you may have to find free royalty-free music sources to complement your video. So let's start with, this first one, the concussion one, which is pretty straightforward. And what we'll do is we'll skip over the cut page, which is the second tab here. Briefly, I'll touch on the cut page, and I prefer to edit this when I'm doing a lot of interview type stuff, just because I can work with, the whole sort of interview and then cut pieces up from here and kind of get a good, what I like to call first pass. But we'll skip here and we'll go right to the edit page, which is basically where most editors will work in for this program. So I'll actually give me 1 second here. Let me just close some windows. Okay. So on the top left, you'll kind of see where everything lives, all your clips and stuff, and what you have. So you've got your folders, and you can double click on your folders, and you can see all of your sort of assets with your with your video edit. And you can have different views. You can have views like that, so you can see exactly what clips you'd be bringing in to your edit. So I've got this little map of Canada, this little graphic, that stock photo, Krembil exterior, and then the photo of a researcher. So um, in this is sort of where we'll live. We won't worry about the effects, edit index, and sound library. We won't worry too much about that right now. But what I want to do first actually is, for this one, I'm going to put down a background because this will be sort of a simple graphic photo video that will sort of mix. So all I can really do here is just kind of drag it to the timeline here. And you see what happens when you drag it is that a timeline gets automatically created when you drag it to this empty space at the bottom. Now you could do that, or you could right click in this space, go timelines, and then say create new timeline. So you can do that. That's one way of creating a timeline as well. You always have to have a timeline when you are creating a video edit. That's basically going to tell you where you're going to make certain cuts or where you're going to place certain elements. And that will be the final thing that you will export. That will be your final videos, exporting the timeline. In this case, it's called Timeline 1. You can rename it if you want. I won't rename it right now, but I've got a background on video layer 1. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend it out for however long. I can always cut it down later to whatever the final video is going to be. And so for the concussion video, what I did was actually I created a bit of a copy. So the copy is basically the story or text or some guidelines that might drive your video edit. So in that one, what I will do next, I will actually drop down this map of Canada. So again, you can just drop it into here. And now I've got that map on here. So this screen, this left window here, you could basically kind of drag any of these to preview into the left window. So from your media pool or your folder, you can kind of see what they look like. And this won't go on your timeline if you drag anything here into this left window. If you decide to put something on your timeline, you can drag to the right window, and it can say if you want to overwrite, replace, fit to fill, place on top, and really anything, or tells you where you want to put this sort of clip. I tend to like to put it into the preview first and then see what I have, especially if it's like a talking head or something with movement. I can sort of figure out where I want it to start, where I want it to end, and then put only that section. And in this case, since they're just static images, I'm just going to put the whole thing in. And so I'm just going to extend that out a little bit. Okay. So I've got this nice photo of Canada. Great. Okay. So in my copy, I have written 1.5 million Canadians are living with the effects of an acquired brain injury. Cool. I'm going to copy that text from my copy file, which is a Word document or a text document. I know you guys can't see that because I've got, I can only share one window, but I've got that copy, and I'm going to actually add some text to this. Now, this is where you're going to come to the effects library. And so the effects library has a ton of features, and we're going to go to titles. And so you have a choice of titles, lots of titles, some with cool effects, but I'm going to keep it simple, and we're just going to add the basic text. So we're going to just drag this thing. Think of it as another element. You can just drag this and bring it down to your timeline. Okay. And now I've got a title, but we can see it kind of on the left here. It's kind of overlapped on the Canada map. And so what we're going to do actually to kind of preview the settings of this, we're going to go to the Inspector tab. So whenever you see a red box around an element on your timeline and you hit Inspector, it'll bring up all the features and parameters for that element. In this case, I've got the text title highlighted. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that text into here. So 1.5 million Canadians are living with the effect of an acquired brain injury. Now, so when I talked about sort of beginning, middle, and end, this is sort of my hook, right? So I'm going to kind of hook people in to a stat, right? And 1.5 million Canadians, like that's a lot, right? It's a lot of people that are being affected by brain injury. So people are gonna be like, wow, like I didn't know that, or they might be like, okay, I kind of want to know more. In this case, though, the text is a bit too big for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to split this into two text elements. And so I'll get rid of this. I'll start with 1.5 million Canadians. Now the color, of course, will have to change. For simplicity's sake, let's make it black. Normally what I would do is I would make it the Krembil blue. I feel like I should have that hex code memorized by now, but I don't. So forgive me. But so we'll make it black for now. And I'll change the font since it is a Krembil sort of a Krembil media asset. I will change it to Myriad Pro. So you can scroll and kind of find Myriad Pro wherever that is. This is all in alphabetical order. Myriad Pro Black. So that's the font that we use. And so I kind of want this to sort of be in Western Canada, if you will, this 1.5 million. So I can hit enter, a hard return basically. And now what I'm going to do is change the position of it. So in this case, in this bottom tab, you can kind of see position, the X coordinates and the Y coordinates. So basically all we're going to do is change the X and Y coordinates until it appears into this thing and you can kind of see it move, right? Great. So 1.5 million Canadians. I find the font might be a bit too big here, so I'm just going to make it a bit smaller. Right. And then maybe I don't like the line spacing because it's a bit much. Maybe I'll make that and bring these a bit closer so it looks a little bit more stacked. Great. So now I've got this text, 1.5 million Canadians. And now this will play for however long I extend this out for. In this case, since it's very short, I'm only going to make it about maybe 2 seconds. And you can see the timer here on the left. So you can bring your playhead, this little red thing here, and we can go to 2 seconds. Let's go let's go 2 seconds right about there. And then I can drag this in to about 2 seconds. So now this text is only going to be on screen for 2 seconds. And you see it disappeared as soon as I hit play. To hit play, you could either hit play up here or spacebar. Spacebar will also play anything that you have on the timeline. So now remember the second part of that sort of text, live with a form of acquired brain injury. I still want to include that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this text. So I can either hit Control C and then move my playhead and hit Control V and it'll duplicate that. Or alternatively, what I can do is I can click this. You see the red highlighted box around the rectangle, and I can hold Alt and then just drag it out and it duplicates it as well. So in this second text box, it's going to say the same thing because we haven't changed the text again in this sort of setting inspector tab. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just change that. And then I'm going to get rid of the first part, which we already included. And then I'm going to do some hard returns. And what I'm going to do is, this is a bit big. Obviously it doesn't fit. So I'm going to lower the font. I'm going to increase the line spacing because I don't want them to look too big. I'm also going to change the alignment because I think this looks a bit weird. So I'm going to left align it. And I'm going to move this a bit up and a little bit over so it kind of still lives in Canada. Of course, you might have to play around with this a little bit to see what looks best. Of course, we're starting with this big sort of fact where we hit play and then we go to the smaller font. That may have to change depending on how it looks visually. But that's kind of my hook, right? And you want to make sure this sort of second text part is long enough for people to read. So in this case here, what I'll do is I'll just zoom into the timeline here. And you can zoom in by holding Alt and using your mouse scroll wheel to zoom in. And so I don't want it to be the same because there's more words here. So I'll probably make it about 4 seconds. So maybe let's go to this 8 second mark up here. And so now this will read 1.5 million Canadians are living with the effects of an acquired brain injury. Great. So I've got my text on there. And the next part is we're still going to keep the background, but we're going to get rid of this Canada map and bring in another graphic element. So I'm going to keep my playhead to here. And if you want things to kind of snap into place as soon as you like move over certain cuts, click the magnet here This magnet just means that it's going to snap to playheads or certain time points. So you don't have to kind of guess of where you want to end your clip. In this case, I'm going to just drag this back to this playhead and it just kind of snaps right there. So now this Canada sort of graphic just ends right where my text ends on screen. So let's go and bring in another graphic element. So let's go back to the media pool. And since we're talking about concussion on this one, let's bring in the concussion little graphic here. Again, if you want to preview it, you can sort of minimize this inspector tab. You can get rid of that. And then if you wanted to preview it, you can bring it to this left window. But since we know it's a static image, I'm not too worried. I'm just going to drag it to this timeline. Now, since it is a PNG, that means it's got a transparency layer to it. That means any background you put it on, it'll be transparent. So there's no white or black that would show up on top of this blue background that I have here. So in this case, great. I've got this, I've got that. People can read it. And then I've got this. So the copy for this, I may actually want to move this down a little bit so I could fit the copy, or I may make it a bit smaller. Now, say if this is a bit too big, you can go to the inspector tab up here again with that clip highlighted. Remember, if it's highlighted with red, that's the clip that you're going to be working with or manipulating. So when you hit the inspector tab, you're working with this clip. Say I want to make this a bit smaller, you can just drag the zoom to the left, and then you've made it a bit smaller. Say you don't want it to be in dead center, you can move X and Y, right? So Y, your vertical position. X, you can translate it left and right. For this one, let's say I want it to be here, and I want it to be a bit bigger. And say if you want to reset everything, you see this sort of, it's kind of a reset button. I call it the reset button, but basically it just reverts back to the original position. So I can hit that and then I can start over again. In this case, all I want to do for this one is put it to this side. Now, again, I'm going to use the text because I want some text to go with this. I'm just going to copy this same text layer over here because any parameters here like color, font will be preserved in that copy. So I don't have to create a new one every single time. I can save time by just, Control C, Control V, and then all I have to do is change the copy. So the one for this one, it's going to say sustained a concussion, like as a question. You can see it kind of matches the graphic. Now the position of it obviously is a bit off. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this over to here using the position X and Y on the inspector tab for this text layer. You can see highlighted in red. That's the one we're working with. And we're going to move this up. Okay. Now, this is where you can get really interesting because there is a second part of this, but I still want sustained a concussion to stay on screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to extend this out, maybe a bit longer than I need for the moment. And then what I'll do is I will add the second text on top of that. So they're basically going to come in one after another, and I'll show you how that's done. Again, I'm just going to copy this second layer. Alt, I'm going to use Alt this time, click, and I'm just going to drag upwards. You can see what happens when I drag up. It creates a new video track. Now, this second video track of text is basically staying in the same spot as the first one. Obviously, now we can move it, and you can see if I move it using the inspector tab with this layer selected, if I move it down, you can see where that sort of shows up, right? It's the same text, but now I've moved it down. Now, what I want to do is change this copy, and I'm going to change it to something else. I've just copied that from my copy, and may have to, let's go with this. Normally, I would put some more thought into my sizing, but this is just an example. So I want that to show up, but I want it to show up after sustained a concussion, like if that's the question we're asking to say the audience. Also, I'm going to change the alignment of this, and then I'll move this down a little bit and move it over a little bit again with the video track layer highlighted and kind of align it to that. So now what happens is if I hit play, both of those things come up at the same time. All we need to do to make this bottom text come up later is basically delay when it comes on screen. So how do we do that? We can just drag the start time over. See where my playhead is? Maybe that's where I want it to come up. I can just drag this over. And now that's when that video layer will appear, right? So I'm going to hit play. It says sustaining concussion. And then it tells you what to do, right? Cool. We could obviously get creative with this and we could add some effects of how they come on screen, like dissolves and stuff, but I'll get that towards the end and sort of explain what you can do with certain effects. But for now, let's just kind of get the copy and everything on screen. So great. So I've got that. Nice. Basically some information that you can use if you do sustain a concussion. Now, the next part of my copy is going to be talking about multiple head injuries. So let's move this. Let's copy this concussion graphic over, because all I'll do is I'm going to copy it over. And again, I just used Alt and I dragged over, holding the clip, and this appears. Now that text obviously is not there anymore, so obviously you're not going to see it. But I want to say something like sustained a concussion. The next copy I have is sustained, I think, sustained multiple head injuries. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a moment. And what we're going to do actually is I'm actually going to move this up a little bit to its different layer. So you can sort of click and drag up and you can kind of go to infinite amount of video layers. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this concussion sort of graphic into another one. So I'm going to hold Alt, drag up, Control C or Control V, same thing. And I'm going to copy it to, this video track above. Now there's 3 of those. I basically want to show that multiple concussions. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make some of these smaller. And then I'm going to move them around to show multiple head injuries. So again, highlighted the one that you're working with. So I'm going to go to the track below, highlight that one, make that smaller. And I'm going to leave that one there, maybe. And the last one, bottom one, make that smaller. And then I'm going to move that around to something like that. Of course, get kind of creative with the position. I mean, this looks a bit awkward, so maybe I'll come here. I'll make a triangle with these elements, right? So this basically shows what I'm trying to show is like you can use the same graphic more than once, right? You can kind of just get creative, especially with the accompanying copy. So when it goes from this, sustain multiple head injuries, cool. Now what do you want to tell people? Make sure you leave enough time for this on screen. So say that's kind of where I want it. I'm going to just drag. I can select all of these at once if you just click and highlight, and then I can move all of these at once. Now you see everything gets moved over to there. Cool. Sustained multiple head injuries. Great. Okay. It's on screen for however long I want. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in what Krembil does, some of the research that we do. So I'm going to bring in this Krembil photo, and I'm just going to drop it in on here. So I've got a great photo of Krembil. I'm actually going to make this a bit smaller because I kind of want it to live a little bit to the right. Let's move it over to the right. Actually, hold on. I'm going to reset because I want it center, and I just want to move it to the right. There. Nice, beautiful looking photo of Krembil. Great. And then I'm going to put in the research that we're doing. Again, I'm going to just copy this text layer again and move this over. I'm going to align that left with the inspector tab. Again, remember the layer that you're working with and the element you're working with is the one with the red box that's highlighted. I'm just going to select all this text. And I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to format it to where I would like it. Oops. So that things live where they should. So kind of got perfect. Let's move this down a little bit. And again, if you don't like the position of this, you can reset it. Now that's center with the screen, and I can just move that over. So this is cool. Yeah, I've got some cool knowledge here. Sustained multiple head injuries. And then it can tell you about what Krembil scientists are doing to help understand multiple head injuries. In this case, they're looking at biomarkers for early prevention, detection, that kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool. And make sure this is long enough so that your viewers can read it. So play your clip. And if you don't finish it before it disappears, obviously it's too short, then you can kind of drag it out and make sure that graphic element also is going to be dragged out as well, in line with how long the text is on screen. And then usually what I like to do is I kind of like to end with a quote, So I've got this great photo of Dr. Tartaglia. I know I didn't include it in the sort of assets that I shipped off in the reminder. I just hadn't gotten approvals from some of the PIs if I could share the photo, so I didn't want to do that. So you could use a photo of your team, your lab, whatever it may be. And then usually what I like to do is I'll make this a bit smaller. Or if you want, you can have this go the whole screen and sort of make it bigger than the background. Actually, let's do that. It's a nice photo of Dr. Tartaglia, at least I think it is. So I'm going to make it bigger. And so it covers the whole screen here. And again, you do that using the zoom tools on whatever clip is highlighted in red. And there we go. That's great. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically copy the same text, but I'll have to change some of the parameters because we're now on a photo. And obviously this is like impossible to read, but I will just basically copy a quote. There we go. And let's change this to white. Okay, maybe that works. And so in this case, what I will do is I will just kind of, oops, that there. And it's a little bit hard to see. So what we can do is we can add a bit of a background, or we can add some elements to have it stick out. We can do a drop shadow. So we can do that. Is there a drop shadow here that I can see? Nope. So with the drop shadow, so you have to basically set it where it is. So maybe we can do something like that. And I'm going to move it down a little bit. So now it pops up against the white lab coat. And maybe I don't want it to be, you make it subtle like that. So now that pops a bit better. So you could either do the drop shadow, and this sort of switch here turns it on and off. So you can see what it looks like with it. Sorry. You could add a stroke if you want. So just outlines the text. I'm not a fan of strokes, I'll be honest. That's just me. Time and place, but for this type of stuff, I don't think it works. Or you could just have a background around the quote like this. So I sometimes prefer this. I like this where you have a background around it. And so this kind of looks nice. And let's make the photo as long as the text. And so you basically got your middle here, which is basically steps taken to address multiple head injuries. And this is sort of the end or the solution, right? The hope is to find treatments using the biomarkers in a way that we understand multiple head injuries. What I would normally do from here actually is I may actually add who this doctor is, because, if you're sharing this with the public, some people might not know who Dr. Tartaglia is. Of course, we at Krembil do, but just to make things a bit simpler, what I might do is I might duplicate this text layer. And then what I'll do is I'll make the font size a lot smaller. Or what I'll do is I'll actually change the font just to Myriad Pro. I'll make it a lot Whoops. What's going on here? And let's change that to Dr. Tartaglia. And let's make this a bit smaller. And let's position this. Oops. And I'll get rid of this background actually, because I don't want it on this part because it's already on there. So with this text element, I'm just going to move it down and to the left there. So pretty much I'm done. That's pretty much it. And I've basically created a nice little graphic. We can play it through. It's about 30 seconds. Here's your hook. Cool. That might be a bit long, so I can always rework that. Yeah, it's like, oh, you sustained a concussion. What do you do next? Cool. That's probably a bit long, so I might cut that down. Sustained multiple head injuries. What's Krembil doing about it? Cool. Wow, I didn't know about biomarkers. Really interesting. And then what's the next steps, right? You got a great photo to kind of cap it off with. So those texts might be a bit long in some sections, so you can always go back, rework the length and stuff like that. And then you can also add effects. Say if you want to dissolve, you kind of between these two clips, you kind of just click in between the two clips, and then you can click and then right click, and then you can add a cross dissolve, and then it'll now fade. Like you can see how that fades. But of course, all those can live in the effect libraries, video transitions. If you go up to effect libraries and video transitions, so you can choose from a bunch of different transitions between your clips, and you just drag the element between the clip, and you'll sort of see it flip and do something like that. But that's pretty much the basics of this sort of video editor, and you can see all the functionality built in. I don't think I've got time for that second example, but if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them about DaVinci Resolve, about video editing, about content creation in general. So if anyone does have questions, I'm happy to take them. Okay. Questions. Okay, let me stop the share. All right, so I feel like there are a few questions here in the chat. So say thanks for doing this, super helpful. You're welcome. Is there a library of assets we can use or access, or do you need to purchase this? So in terms of assets, feel free to even go onto stock photo websites like Unsplash. So you can search on Unsplash for certain elements, like even time lapses and video elements. So if you want to incorporate stock footage like that, there are free stock video websites and stock photo websites. For public affairs, yes, we have a subscription to certain elements, but that's just for public affairs since we do create a lot of content. The next question, are you able to put transitions on items such as the background text? Yes, absolutely. So these transitions right here, I'll share my screen again. So the transitions here, these in the sort of effects library on the top, in the edit tab, tons of transitions. You can do crash zooms, cross dissolves. I would just be sort of careful with it. If it's too distracting, then probably not the best idea. Something simple obviously does worlds better than something that's sort of a bit more garish, because you don't want to distract from the content. You basically want the content to sort of live and sort of speak for itself, right? You don't want to take away too much from the content because you're trying to inform people and educate people, especially with this type of content. Let's see here. Are there other questions? What is the minimum system requirements for this software? Does it record screen too? Good question. So minimum system requirements, I believe, are listed on Blackmagic Design's website. I know there are For the free version, I know it's basically, for terms of computing power, it's CPU bound, meaning that your processor is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of decoding any video elements and then re-encoding them to a final video. And I'll kind of touch on that. Sorry, that's the one thing I guess I forgot. How do you export everything? So you're going to come to this last tab here, which is basically a rocket, and that's the deliver tab. And here you have a bunch of presets. So usually I just pick presets. If it's going on Twitter, I'll click Twitter. And in this, you can even like upload directly to Twitter if you've got your account linked. But you basically choose where you want it to export to, like what folder. Maybe you've got a folder on your computer, and then you would add it to the render queue. Let's just say I'll put it here. Sure. And then you said render all, and then wherever you've rendered to, that's where your final file will live. Sorry, one detail I forgot how do you get it out there, right? Yeah, so this doesn't record to the screen. OBS is something that you'd want for recording your screen. Like say if you're, showing tutorials and stuff like that. OBS is a free software as well that can record screen captures. And then the other question is, could you provide any websites for free royalty-free music? Good question. I don't know off the top of my head, but a quick Google search, I'm sure you could find some free royalty-free music websites. I know on YouTube, there's a ton of like videos that have royalty-free music built in, and then it links to those websites as well. So I'm sure a quick search would probably help you find some of those assets and elements. And any other questions? No? Do we have our prize draw?
We sure do.
Yeah.
In my trusty little box again. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Here is your chance at winning one of our nifty Krembil collectibles. I'll call these collectibles now. Of course, I'll just remind you this is new for the season. A Krembil little notebook and a pen. I can't get enough of this. I have to showcase it every week. So all of your names are in this box. And here we go with the draw. Just so it's completely transparent. All right. Okay, I see you are online, but my apologies if I cannot pronounce your name properly.
Yeah, Gavramadan.
Pardon me?
Gavramadan, thanks.
Gavramadan, congratulations. Thank you for joining us. You are welcome to reach out to us to let us know which prize you would like to select. As a reminder, we also have the Krembil mug that was one of the favorites last year. We also have a Krembil tie, a scarf. Anything else, Heather? I think there was one more thing, right?
I was just going to say, reach out to us at krembil@uhnresearch.ca. That's the best way to reach us.
Yeah. And so I'll kind of say this will all be on our YouTube channel as well, this entire tutorial. I know I tend to do these at breakneck speed, but do feel reassured that you can always go back to something like this and refer to it, and always just take things that you can sort of pick and use for your own content creation. And I will say DaVinci Resolve is starting to become more of a mainstream editor. So you will find more and more tutorials on all the features of DaVinci Resolve, including all the other tabs I didn't go over, which are for some more, I would say, in-depth and I guess advanced tools. But again, tons of resources online for this editor. And also this will be made available on our YouTube channel at Krembil.
Can we just talk for a moment about how cool Twain looks in his studio setting?
I'm just using, I'm using one of my cameras as a webcam. Again, if you have a camera, a digital camera, they have software that'll turn it into a webcam. Just check on the manufacturer's website. And then there's just a simple light and my sound panels, so my neighbors don't hear me. So.
Okay, next week we've got our Twitter 101 workshop, and then Twain, you're going to be rounding us out the following Friday with graphic design, right?
Yeah, that's a fun one. So I'll actually, for that one, I'll focus on a free software again. So we'll talk about Canva. So we'll I'll show you the ins and outs of Canva and how we can create some cool posters, graphics, stuff to complement your research, or anything like that using Canva.
Okay, let's wrap it up.
Have a nice long weekend.
All right. Thanks, everyone.